Evet, bir. Tamam. Açık ses. Sıkıntı yok değil mi?
Yok, geliyor.
Aras, kamerada var.
Bende.
Var mı?
Tamamdır. Hi there, Professor Rodowick, do you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
This is Özer. I will be moderating during your session.
Okay.
I think communicated with you, but during the session, I'm gonna moderate your session. This is kind of technological check. Is it possible to share your presentation if you are gonna use the presentation for the session? Is there any presentation?
You mean share my PowerPoint, you mean?
Yeah, please.
Yes. I'm working on that.
I just want you to share it now.
It's weird. I'm wondering if I'm on the right. Did I call on the right link? I've got a number of different links, so I'm what is it doing here? Why do we not see it?
That you're going to display for today's speech? Is there a
yeah, I'm looking for the oh, here it is.
Okay. Can you share it?
PowerPoint, Rodowick, here we go.
Yeah,
here we are.
Your presentation, it's great. There's no problem about it.
Good.
Are you going to show or display any video?
There will be video within the PowerPoint slide.
Is it possible to show it for us now to check it whether it's going to work or not?
Sure. 1 second.
Thank you.
Let me get to a good one.
I think it's working, but there is no sound.
Oh, that's weird. There's sound on my end. It should be pretty loud.
We can see the video, but we can't hear any sound about it.
I think that's got to be a problem on your end.
Can be.
Here, I'll keep playing it so you could, because I've got sound. Oops, where is it?
Can you hear the video sound on your own?
Yeah.
We can't hear it. Let's check our own system. Sorry for that.
Çekmiyor bu. Sound çek. Nerede? Kameraya zoom sesi veriyorsunuz. Bunu çözmeniz lazım. Kameraya zoom sesi gelmez.
Sorry for the inconvenience. Before your speech starts, we try to figure out the problem to prevent any technological inconvenience.
Konuşmadı beyefendi. Bir beyefendiden ses alabilir miyiz?
Professor Rodowick, can you speak a word for us, please, to check the
Yeah,
system?
sure. Is the
Okay.
sound coming through or not?
Yeah. Can you play the video again for us, please, to check it whether it's going to work or not?
It's playing right now. I can see it on your screen.
Sound, right? You hear the sound, but we can't, I think. Yeah. Sorry for that.
Sonra monitörde zoom alıyor.
Sadece moderatördeyiz biz.
Tamam. Dün öyle yaptık.
Bu tarz işlemlerde biz sadece moderatördeyiz, tamam mı? Çünkü o beyefendi de sadece bizim gösterdiğimiz kamerayı görüyor. Bizde 3 tane kamera var. Birisi
Oraya geliyor mu?
Biri onu çekiyor, birisi de direkt moderatörü çekiyor. Bu şeyde oturumlar.
Do you use a headphone now?
Moderatör yani özel büyük ihtimalle. Tamam hocam. Orada yani. Onu çekiyor.
Professor Rodowick, do you use a headphone?
Yeah, I'm using earbuds.
I think since you are using an earbud, probably you can hear the sound, but we can't. This is
I'm
because
gonna
of
check the
sound preferences, but I have a cat walking over my keyboard. Go away, little mischief maker. Let me try. Actually, it's the only video that has sound. So if we have to skip it, it probably won't be. I mean,
Can you
sound
turn
part.
off the turn off the headphone and we can try it again if it is possible for you, Professor
Yeah,
Rodowick.
1 second.
Possible for you?
Of course.
Sorry,
Gigi, go away.
very sorry for it.
You hear the sound now?
Is it possible to unplug the headphone? The final time we're gonna try it like that. Because everything is okay apart from your video. Sorry for this. And you have a very great cat. I think it's so cute.
Bir daha konuşabilir miyim? Ses geldi buradan.
Müzik mi geldi?
Beyefendi.
Gigi, get in here.
Bundan buraya ses gelmemesi gerekiyor ya. Bir daha konuşabilir miyim?
Mr. Rodowick, so probably you are hearing your video's not voice now, right now? Is it okay? I think you are using the video within the PowerPoint presentation. Is it possible to share the video apart from this? Is it possible?
So what is the sound situation?
We still can't hear the voice, can't hear the sound actually. Is it possible to play the video without using the PowerPoint? Do you have the video? Is it possible for you? Can't hear. So, Professor Rodowick, do you have the video without is there any possibility to use the video without using PowerPoint presentation to check it ready?
Good question. But as I said, it's the only video in my presentation that has sound. And so even though sound's important for the piece, we may just have to skip it. Let's see. Is anybody on here? Yeah, I'd have to go find it on another hard drive. I think it's going to take me too much time to set all that up. So I think we're just going to have to forget about the sound on that.
Okay. We're going to start within 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to inform you about the presentation start. I think we can't solve the sound problem, but we will try it again. Sorry for
Yeah, that's all right. You might be, now that I've taken off my earbuds, you might pick up some of the sound from my own computer.
I didn't understand why
microphone,
it's not
so.
working, but we're trying to solve this.
Is the sound coming through now?
Mr. Rodowick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
We're gonna start within a 5 minute, okay?
Sure.
For being late and sorry for because of technological inconvenience.
I know this happens. Well, as I said, I think you can just forget about that. That's the only video with sound, and it's not going to be a giant problem if there's no sound there.
Before your presentation starts, I'm gonna give a very short information about your academic life, and then your presentation is gonna start. So
Sure.
okay. See you.
Devam edecek. Daha böyle insani parlatıldı.
Değerli konuklar, ikinci günün ilk oturumuna hoş geldiniz. Az sonra Keynote Speaker'ımız, moderatörümüz Özer Özkantar eşliğinde sizlerle olacak. Ama öncesinde bir hatırlatma yapalım. Simultane çevirilere erişim Zoom mobil uygulaması üzerinden gerçekleştirilecektir. Tercüme hizmetlerimizden yararlanmak için oturumlara kişisel kulaklığınızla cep telefonunuz üzerinden ekrana yansıtılan kare kodu okutarak bağlantı sağlamanız. Aynı zamanda Zoom yayınını Türkçe dinleyebilmek için telefonlarınıza kulaklıklarınızı takmanız önemli rica olunur. Oturumumuz için sözü Özer Özkantar'a bırakıyorum. Buyurun hocam.
Hi again. Welcome to International Symposium on Cinema and Philosophy. And it's a great to announce our keynote speaker, David Rodowick. Before David Rodowick is going to start the speech named Philosophy by Other Means, I'm going to give a very short information about him. So David Rodowick is a professor in cinema and media studies. Having taught at Yale University until 1991, Rodowick began the film studies program there. After studying cinema and comparative literature at the University of Texas, Austin, and at University of Pius III, he obtained a PhD at the University of Iowa in 1983. Rodowick subsequently taught at the University of Rochester and King's College, University of London, where he founded the Department of Film Studies and the Film Study Center. Special research interests include aesthetics and the philosophy of art, the history of film theory, philosophical approach to contemporary arts and culture, and the impact of new technologies on contemporary society. Rodowick is also a curator and award-winning experimental filmmaker and video artist. With Victor Virgin, he was awarded in 2016 a Mellon Collaborative Fellowship at the Richard and Mary L. Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry, University of Chicago, to produce new video work. He is also a member of the International Association of Art Critics and the Arts Club of Chicago. Yes, Professor Rodowick, this is your turn. We're waiting for you. Thanks a lot from in advance.
Thank you for the nice introduction. You forgot to add that I'm happily retired, which is which is nice. Yeah, I'm going to dive right into this presentation, which is an odd, interesting paper. It's an interesting exercise for me because I usually don't talk about, I usually keep my artistic life and my philosophical life separate. And it was at the encouragement of Raymond Velour that I began to think about writing this paper, or I talked about, I guess I would call it the virtuous circle between my experimentations in digital video and my philosophical work. And so I'll get right to it. Like many other great philosophers, both ancient and modern, Gilles Deleuze was an inventive stylist whose writing compares in force and power to figures as diverse as Emerson and Nietzsche or Wittgenstein and Cavell. From works like Difference and Repetition and Logic of Sense to 1,000 Plateaux or What is Philosophy, how is it possible to separate his art of thinking from the writerly composition of concepts in space and time, whose attention to the weaving of voice, polyphony, and counterpoint seems so close to orchestration in music? In fact, one cannot. Thinking and the expressive line are inextricably intertwined in the great philosophical stylists. Deleuze himself beautifully voiced this perspective in a lecture entitled "What is the Creative Act?" presented at the French National Film School, La Femis, in 1991, which opens with the question, what does it mean to have an idea in cinema? Deleuze continues by noting an experience all too familiar to every creative mind. Having an idea is an event worth celebrating because its occurrence is rare and unpredictable. To think, one must prepare a terrain and a context where an idea can germinate and unfold, because having an idea is not something general. No one has an idea in general, Deleuze writes. An idea is already dedicated to a particular field. Sometimes it is an idea in painting, or an idea in a novel, or an idea in philosophy, or an idea in science. Ideas have to be treated like potentials already engaged in one mode of expression or another, and inseparable from the mode of expression, such that I cannot say that I have an idea in general. Depending on the techniques I am familiar with, I can have an idea in a certain domain, an idea in cinema, or an idea in philosophy, end quote. One of the principal lessons expressed here is that there is no difference between theory and practice. I have often been asked to explain how I understand the relationship between my philosophical work and my creative practice. For many years, my habitual response was simple, though perhaps not very clear or revealing. I am thinking, and these are two media or practices wherein or through which I feel compelled to think. Or as Deleuze might say, I am thinking, but in the two different domains of concept and image. The inescapable impulse to create experimental images and to write what is sometimes called theory has for me always arisen simultaneously, as if springing from the same barely conscious point of origin. Many years later, I discovered that Henri Bergson named this experience as intuition and made it the ground of his creative philosophy. There is nothing mysterious or occult about intuition. Intuition is a concrete philosophical practice where thinking deeply engages with the matter and time of human and inhuman life. Its modes of attention are open to everyone, whether artist or philosopher. What Bergson calls intuition is a way of engaging thoughtfully with the world and all the complexities of spatial and temporal experience of being in the world, with the fullness of your combined mental, perceptual, and bodily attention. Philosophical intuition recognizes the scientific importance of applying concepts analytically to experience, of course. But this is only one pole of experience that often camouflages another. In its deepest sense, philosophical intuition involves thinking directly in and through sensory experience, both perceptually and mentally, where body and mind resonate in their multiple relations with the world's forces, energies, and matters of sensation. From this perspective, intuition is a practice of philosophical investigation that eliminates hierarchies of perceptual and mental experience. Thoughtful investigation through intuition may lead to philosophy, that is conceptual expression, or unfold itself in perceptual experience, say images, or what Deleuze calls percepts. But somewhere their borders always touch and interpenetrate, flowing into and out of one another in what Bergson calls an image moyenne, or mediating image, where, quoting Bergson, an image which is almost matter in that it still allows itself to be seen, and almost mind in that it no longer allows itself to be touched, unquote, whose point of departure may be mental experience, thinking as philosophy, or a perceptual experience, thinking through the image. The scandal remains, but must be directly confronted. What would it mean to propose seriously that creative work is a philosophical practice? The time has come for examples. Take as one point of departure the relation between problems and ideas as related to intuition. Here, the philosophical question one might ask of any given creative work is, how does an intuition give rise to an idea that is formulated in response to a problem? If there is any unifying thread to my creative practice, and I believe there is, it arises in intuiting ways of making movement and time problematic in relation to perception and thought. Investigating the mediation of temporal experience by technicity, the logical design of cameras, lenses, and recording media, whether analog or digital, is also of special interest to me. All of my moving image works may be read as posing new questions or problems about temporal and sensory experience by experimentally testing the normative design of recording devices and programs with respect to the capture of light, space, color, movement, duration, and time. In this respect, I have a continuing interest in amateur or consumer recording technologies and programs because they are machines designed to reproduce automatically a limited set of perceptual norms of space and time. The question then arises, how can one creatively extract or produce different dimensions of sensation by experimentally testing these technologies, by pushing them beyond their design parameters in ways that submit them to an internal critique? Take, for example, two of my own short works made 30 years apart, South Coast Road Frame Displacement from 1982, which was a 16 millimeter film, and Waterloo from 2012, which is shot in high definition video. First, let's have a look at Waterloo. It's very short.
Bekle. Sen değilmiş.
Sen hareket olunca ama bununla beraber böyle hep mi öyle olsun?
Yani genellikle sizin içinde dahil olmaz mı? Bir insan alışveriş gibi işte hocayla. Yani sen de
Onların amacı şey, uzman moderatörün şeyini vermek.
anladın. Ara değiştirir karşılığı. Yaptığında şey yapar, yine birer yani şey konuşacak. İletişim kanalının için çıkarsın. Bir sosuna bakalım.
And now we'll have a look at Waterloo as a point of comparison. I'm going to turn up my computer sound really loud, so maybe you'll be able to pick up the sound from the video from my space.
Professor Rodowick, we can see everything, but we can't hear the sound because of the technological inconvenience. I want you to inform me about this.
Don't worry about it. One obvious commonality between the two works is their internal time structure and the fact that they are made through improvised performative actions that are territorially delimited in space and duration. The basis of both works are circular walks in defined locations. Southcote Road documents the street where I lived in London on the last day of a 7-week stay in the summer of 1981. Waterloo documents an urban any space whatever in contemporary London. The brevity and temporal discipline of the second walk is inspired by the first. Editing plays no role in either work, apart from starting and stopping a process. Like many of my earlier films, Southcote Road is structured by a gestural performance improvised within an automated protocol. In this instance, programming the camera with an intervalometer to capture 1 frame per second until after 3 minutes, the film runs out. Unlike digital capture, which is limited in duration only by the memory capacity of digital devices, here time is a finite resource that expires in a fixed interval. In Waterloo and my other digital walking works, I apply this durational constraint as an abstract discipline in order to restore the value and density of time to a digital domain where time is in principle unlimited and thus increasingly devalued. Absent from the projected space of Southcote Road is evidence of the physical exhaustion and actual duration of the performance, which took nearly 1 hour to record with a handheld Super 8 camera. In Waterloo, however, the time of the work is the time of the walk. Just under 4 minutes long, Waterloo captures in real time a thoroughly mundane location and situation. 2 circular trajectories through an underground passageway connecting the London IMAX Theatre to Waterloo Station. Using an iPhone on a hand-manipulated monopod, I follow a figurative line drawn by the electrical conduit running along the top of the tunnel walls. Of course, this is not what one sees in the image. Similar to Southcote Road, Waterloo is recorded in a single take using a capture rate of 1 frame per second. As I move through the space, focus, exposure, and effective shutter speed are allowed to float. The initial images begin almost as abstract color fields that are blurred, textured, and fluid, passing in pastels of yellow-green, watery lime, light and dark blue, and fuchsia with blue blotches, before resolving into a new series of volumes that emerge as if roughly extracted from the electrical conduit. Jagged tubular shapes expand, contract, and torque while dissolving and reshaping themselves unpredictably against the varying and textured color fields. These tonalities emerge in response to the shifts in color temperature and luminance produced by the tunnel's sources of artificial illumination. The sound is captured in real time along with these images. Distant traffic, rumblings, footsteps, drunken laughter, and snippets of animated conversation. The off-screen presence of real-time synchronized audio, which alas, you couldn't hear, is an important temporal marker for the rhythmic succession of only apparently still images are shaped by a duration every bit as real as the sound. Despite other similarities, I think of these two works as experiments aimed at extracting novel dimensions or varieties of time from a given duration by exploring how spatial intervals produce tensions between stillness and movement. There is also something like an epistemological difference between the two works, as defined by their improvised gestural performances in the analog and digital domains. Southcote Road's compositional gestures are photographic and reflexive, while Waterloo's are phenomenological and sensory. The automated operations of the intervalometer in Southcote Road compress time and duration so as to unveil the materiality of the film strip in a stuttering series of sequential images that shape a perceptual mise-en-abîme where the camera hand works to frame the mirror hand. There is a constant doubling of frame and screen as rotations, of the mirror produce a cascade of reflected images from the off-screen space. Again, this is a reflexive gesture where the image sees itself, as it were. Alternatively, in Waterloo, it is as if the gestural hand paints a digital space because the algorithms for maintaining focus, exposure, and color rendering lag behind the movements of the hand in this low light environment. On top of or alongside the uninterrupted duration of the soundtrack, there unfolds in the replacement of one image by another a digital domain whose framing of movement has a different phenomenological status than an analog photogram. It is more a phase space of fluid and abstract transitions than a series of animated stills. Call this a digital time that appears in the image because the automated and algorithmic functions built into the camera continually fail to maintain the normative perception for which they were designed. Nevertheless, everything presented on screen in Waterloo is data drawn from the actual environment. Volumes, movements, surfaces, light intensities, color temperatures. This is the prosaic world in which we situate ourselves, but it is not the world of so-called natural perception, which is still apparent in Southcote Road's staccato series of images. Rather, it is the domain of sensation that lies beneath, over, or inside quotidian vision, as if in another dimension of intensive qualitative experience masked by habitual perception. These first two examples demonstrate the central philosophical thread of my creative practice. With one or two exceptions, none of my works present movement in what is conventionally called real time. Our common sense experience of movement in time is forcefully mediated and constrained by the normative design of cameras. Almost all devices for recording moving images, especially consumer or amateur devices, are designed to capture and present time as if it were a homogeneous medium that unfolds through linear and chronological movements in uniform and continuous changes in space. Either uninterrupted duration or the quantitative addition of continuous spatial sections, that is, either long take or continuity editing. how can we imagine creatively other forms of temporal experience? In the work I'm going to show next, Center Inside Out, made throughout the year of 2013-2014, this work presents another stark alternative related to, yet different from, the temporal tactics I have discussed so far. There is a 27-year gap between my last 16 millimeter film, 1963, which was made in 1983, and my first digital video, Dancing on Hegel's Grave from 2010. There are personal reasons informing this hiatus in my creative activity, but also important technological factors. The middle 80s were a grim period for experimental film, marked for me by the too early passing of Hollis Frampton in 1984. It was getting harder and harder to work in Super 8 or 16 millimeter, and film was beginning to be displaced in many ways by analog video. In this period, I found it difficult to extend my artistic interest using videotape. It seems like a simple matter, but the automatisms of analog video cameras were much harder to subvert, especially the standard frame rate of 30 frames per second and the inescapable attachment of sound to image. There is also the openness of tape in contrast to the temporal discipline of 3-minute duration of Super 8 cartridges or 10 minutes of 16 millimeter reels. I owned and used video cameras throughout those years that failed to produce any interesting work. All of this changed with digital video, especially the flip camera and iPhone. I found the radical portability of these devices to be liberating. It felt freer to record and experiment in new ways. Moreover, I began to discover that digital cameras were fundamentally distinct, perhaps even ontologically distinct, from analog video recorders. Indeed, more like programmable computers with lenses than recording devices. This realization inspired a number of new experiments with non-standard frame rates and shutter speeds. Just what you're looking at now is not my work, but a set of frames from bouquets by Rose Lauder, very important Argentinian French artist, as well as her notebooks with how she works frame by frame with in-camera editing. However, I found myself missing a special capability of Super 8 cameras, which is the possibility of triggering images one photogram at a time and using in-camera editing to build up animated image clusters of various metrical links and combinations. Both Rose Lauder and Kurt Kren have created compelling work with these strategies. Turning a digital recorder on and off is not the same as triggering a single film frame because, as can be seen in the contrast of Waterloo with Southcote Road, the digital image is not a photogram. It is rather a pixel matrix. Unlike Super 8 or 16 millimeter film, it is difficult to animate images in camera because digital cameras capture dynamic data streams rather than whole frames. Change occurs not in the displacement of one image by another, but rather through data operations in a logical space that samples light values and encodes them as symbolic notations of color, intensity, and position. Individual pixels in the matrix correspond to memory locations that are dynamically updated during capture and playback. Pixel values are continually changing, but the matrix itself does not move. At a fundamental level, the digital apparatus conditions time, movement, and space in ways that are profoundly different from the photochemical filmic apparatus, and acknowledging these conditions shape intuitive responses to a new philosophical problem. What is a digital time image? I will return to this question, but for the moment, it is important to acknowledge that digital cameras do capture still image, that is, they make photographs. And here I'm going to show this short work, Center Inside Out, and I'll talk over it because it's silent. Just make sure it's playing. Here we go. Center Inside Out is a love letter to Le Corbusier's Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts at Harvard University, where I spent 9 stimulating years, and a video postcard to the colleagues I left behind there when I moved to Chicago in 2013. The idea in forming Center was to invent a strategy of in-camera digital animation analogous to what is very simply done in the analog domain. The solution was to adapt a time-lapse program for the iPhone, although using it to record only one image at a time at disjoint temporal intervals of 1/30th of a second. The elapsed interval between any given image in Center can range from several minutes to several months, although this is invisible to the viewer in the flood of images passing on screen at 30 frames per second. Center is related to both Southcote Road and Waterloo through the idea of investigating different ways of relating stillness and movement in non-standard times and frame rates. It is also another unedited work, though this time hand animated by taking a series of over 1,000 sequential images, taking a series of over 1,000 sequential still images over a period of a year. The successive images follow a planned trajectory, circling around the outside of the building and then descending in circular movements from the 5th floor to the basement. Individual details are composed to assure maximum discontinuity through a precise compositional discipline. Each successive image is framed to maximize contrasts in terms of scale, shape, color, texture, and other formal values. Despite the apparent rapid-fire continuity, because there is an indefinite interval between each image, the composed fragments assembled on the timeline involve a radical compression of time to an image crystal or constellation where a life lived over 12 months is condensed into 1 minute and 30 seconds. This is a blank slide. The deeper problem I'm trying to define here is the ontological distinctiveness of the presentation of time in digital images, which in my creative work is often intuitively expressed by exploring different varieties of stillness in relation to movement. There is an absolute stillness at the bottom of the cinematographic movement, which is the individual photographic frame on the film strip, where time congeals into a space that cannot be further subdivided. This segmented time then becomes a building block for assembling fixed spatial intervals at various scales, from Eisenstein or Vertas metrical editing to the sequence shots of Orson Welles or Bellatar that define the pulse of time in every filmic image. Alternatively, everything in the digital image is a numerical process, and this intuition leads to 2 fundamental facts whose potential creative difference is very great. First, digital images are never still because their fundamental form is symbolic notation, tokens of numbers within a pixel matrix that neither occupies space nor changes through time. We may perceive movement, but ontologically, the electronic image is never wholly present in either space or time, like a photogram, nor does it pass in any way analogous to the unreeling film strip. Moreover, appearing on electronic displays and screens, the digital image is constructed through dynamic changes in information inputs and outputs within a pixel matrix, which is fundamentally discontinuous. It is never identical to itself in a given moment of time, but rather is presented in a mosaic of oscillating pixels. This discontinuity at the heart of the digital image leads to the second fundamental intuition, which is one can construct micro intervals of time and assemble them into constellations that interact at scales both above and below the frame. Unlike the chemical photogram recorded on the film strip, the digital interval is infinitely variable and scalable. Fitted extension in space is always the measure and limit of photochemical time. Alternatively, within the digital image, composed space and time may be compressed or expanded at will on the editing timeline. Any given interval may in principle be digitally retimed in durations ranging from fractions of seconds to minutes or even hours. I'm now going to show another short video called a pyramid. And for those of you who may be sensitive to stroboscopic images, you're excused from not watching because some people are very sensitive and find such flashing images difficult to watch.
So your speech is over, or
Huh? What? No.
no?
Am I running out of time?
No, you have time. No problem about this.
Okay. You can see the video, right?
We can't see any video or any digital thing on your presentation now. We just see you.
Oh, you can't see my video playing?
Yeah, we can't see anything now.
Well, what I mean, it's the same as the other things that have been shown. Huh.
Okay, we can see it now. It's okay, thanks.
Oops, let me go back and play it. Where am I here? Sure I am. Yeah. This work, Pyramid, is the result of experiments inspired after visiting an exhibition at London's Tate Museum, Conceptual Art in Britain, 1964 to 1979, in 2016. The title of the work and its protagonist refers to Roloff Loh's Soul City Pyramid of Oranges from 1967, a sculpture composed from a pyramid of fresh oranges whose geometry is gradually disrupted as visitors literally consume the work by taking away its organic elements one by one. However, the mathematical protocol and the aesthetic idea informing Pyramid was more directly inspired by John Hilliard's matrix of 70 photographs entitled Camera Recording Its Own Conditions, 7 Apertures, 10 Speeds, 2 Mirrors from 1971. In contrast to Center, Pyramid was animated in Final Cut Pro on the digital timeline in full knowledge that the digital image has no fixed interval, but rather its duration can be digitally retimed along both horizontal and vertical compositional axes. The work is composed from 482 sequential photographs of Loh's eponymous orange, captured with systematic variations in light and dark bracket exposures, which were then assembled into a baseline video of 20 seconds duration, which is itself repeated 10 times. The internal time structure of the work resulted from assembling what I now call a time pyramid, in which 6 layers of the baseline video are superimposed one on top of the other. Each layer is then retimed systematically for shorter and shorter durations, and thus more and more compressed speeds. Viewed as a static graphical picture within the editing program, the stacked layers appear geometrically in the form of a pyramid, thus giving this digital time image its name. But when displayed on the screen, the fixed matter of the orange shatters into bursts of flickering quanta of light or energy that pulses in heterogeneous waves or flows until receding into darkness. The rigid spherical form gradually and systematically dissolves as micro intervals of time accumulate within it, as if in a intensive temporal mise en abîme. The next work I'm going to show is untitled, from 2017, sometimes referred to as Augustine on the Beach, which exemplifies another tactic of using time pyramids to work with intensive and heterogeneous durations. I'm going to begin this video, but I'm also going to talk over it at some point in order to save some time. Untitled is a creative response in the form of another kind of digital time image to the philosophical problem of Augustine's quantalist conception of passing time, in which three temporalities coexist within any given interval: a time present of things past, a time present of things present, and a time present of things future. Here, the baseline is a simple long take of a sunset on the ocean at Éclatat in Normandy, a site favored by many expressionist painters. But similar to Pyramid, this simple duration is interrupted and internally complicated by superimposing eight stacks or layers of the baseline image, whose durations are increasingly compressed. In simple chronological time, the sun sets within 7 minutes. However, the time pyramid in Untitled is constructed so that after 30 seconds, a second layer is superimposed on top of the first, but retimed so that the sun sets within a duration of about 6 minutes, and so on incrementally until at the peak of the pyramid, which we should be about now, the movements of sun, clouds, and waves are compressed into a duration of 1 minute. What one sees inside the work are internal cycles or repetitions of more and more compressed time that blur the image and cause it to vibrate internally with more and more intensive rhythms until its forms begin to dissolve into atmospheres, producing painterly effects not unlike Monet's 1872 Impression au soleil levant. In the final stages of the work, chronological time reasserts itself gradually as the superimposed durations conclude one by one. Let's let it go now to the end because we're close to the end. How am I doing on time, by the way?
Sorry?
I said, how am I doing on time?
About 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes? Okay, I might get closer to a conclusion. There'll be time for discussion. The model of the time period has become more and more frequent in my work, starting with the fourth part of Plato's Phaedrus from 2015-2016, and its companion piece, Agora or Things Indifferent, also from 2015-2016, and extending to more recent videos like Lichtungstest #1 from 2017. While the basic idea may seem simple, I discovered that an almost infinite variety of effects can be produced within the temporal geometry of time pyramids by experimenting with mathematical formulas from manipulating the rational intervals aligned on the horizontal line in relation to the micro intervals ascending into vertical stacks. One might imagine these formulas as a kind of digital alchemy. Okay, I'll continue a little bit. I want to conclude, however, with another idea that is becoming more and more important to both my single channel videos and my work with moving image installations. I call this aspect seeing in time. Aspect perception is a phenomenon familiar to psychology, but its most well-known philosophical examination appears in the second part of Ludwig Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations. Wittgenstein invokes aspect seeing to examine how a given picture can give rise to conflicting or contradictory perceptions and interpretations, as in the famous drawing that can be seen as a duck or a rabbit, but not both simultaneously. However, the problems of interpretation raised by aspect seeing are not limited to spatial illusions. My moving image installation interval takes up this problem as an investigation of how remediations of the historical image, in other words, representing the mediated image under different temporal aspects may affect our perception of time and processes of memory and forgetting. In 1983, I completed a film entitled 1963, A Meditation on History and Violence, which proved to be my last circulating analog work. Made 20 years after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, 1963 is a contemplative investigation of the relation between image and memory, and indeed image as a medium that obscures memory as much as preserving or transmitting it. The paradox here is that the more traumatic the historical event, the more images and documents proliferate around it, clouding or fogging the experience to such an extent that one only sees the obscuring haze. The source material for 1963 was a copy of Abraham Zapruder's notorious 8mm footage of the Kennedy assassination, itself refilmed in color Super 8 off of the screen of a small black and white video monitor as it was broadcast on national television. Already twice mediated, these 26.6 seconds of images was then blown up to 16mm and step printed at one frame a second, slowing and obscuring the image while bringing forward the textures of its electronic and photochemical mediations. In 1963, the step printed sequence is repeated once. History repeats itself, at least in images. More than 50 years have passed since the traumatic year of 1963. In the intervals of time that have now elapsed between and beyond 1963 and 1983, I have often thought about returning to these materials, but in in expanded form and using digital means. Interval is thus a new iteration of my ongoing interest in the fading of memory and historical experience as a function of image and medium. My intuition here is that the mediated images that comprise our collective memory of historical events are subject in complex ways to temporal erosion, where duration becomes distended and elliptical, gapped and perforated, and space is clouded by a thickening or sedimentation of time perceived as indistinct layerings of the past and the present in uneven rhythms. The so-called Zapruder film comprises 486 frames exposed at 18 frames per second on Kodachrome 2 safety film, shot from Zapruder's vantage point on a concrete pedestal along Elm Street and Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Interval's first temporal aspect shift is presented in 18 cyanotype prints aligned in a continuous series on the gallery walls. Each individual print is an image sampled from 1963 by dividing the running time of the work by a factor of 18. Set equidistant from each other, the arrangement of these images in series recalls the unrolling of a strip of film, and their uneven textures and monochrome color are reminiscent of Warhol's Disaster series. And here you see an installation view where Interval was presented at my Berlin gallery, where we actually decided to hang them vertically, like one used to hang while editing film strips in the editing room. Two video projections are set at either end of the print series. The time structure and duration of these works are very different. Indeed, they present two different digital time images. Here I'm going to show a fragment of one of the video projections, which is called Interval Red. I don't think we have time to watch the whole thing. So I'll talk over it and we'll watch it a little bit. The first video, Red, is a time pyramid where a baseline image extracted from 1963 is copied, retimed at different durations, and stacked vertically on the editing timeline in different opacities. The effect of layering different intervals of the image one on top of the other suggests that a heterogeneous and arrhythmic time is itself obscuring the images. Layers loop and retrogress, preventing actions from going forward while splitting, fraying, and dissolving space as if to introduce new contingencies into the event, which nonetheless arrives at its foreordained conclusion. And now a fragment of the second video, which is called Interval Slow. The second projection is ideally set off from the rest of Interval in a quiet and darkened space. If the temporal aspect of the print series suggests an imagined external point of view in a linear, though gapped trajectory in time, and if the first video presents a compression of historical time into densely packed heterogeneous series, the second video offers an impossibly elongated event, slowed to the point of indiscernibility. The space of the second projection is meant to give the impression of residing within our own heads, or some solitary space disconnected from the outer world. This should be a floor-to-ceiling projection. Its material comprises a digitized file of the Super 8 source images for 1963, retimed to a duration of 55 minutes, the exact time elapsed between the landing of Air Force Two at Love Field in Dallas and the firing of the first shot in Dealey Plaza. For viewers...
Sorry, Professor Rodowick. we are running out of time. We have about 2 or 3 minutes for the end of the presentation. Is it possible to make a summary about your presentation, make a conclusion?
I'm going to do even better to that. I have a video summary available. And I think I've said enough about this idea of aspect, scene, and time, and I can return to questions. So let me conclude then by showing one more very short video. Alas, we have a problem, but there's no sound, but there's only a very little sound in the video. So here's my conclusion then. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thanks a lot.
It's funny, I can
So,
see people.
would you mind if I ask a question?
You can ask as many questions as you have time to ask.
Yeah, we have a question about your speech and about your academical interests. What would you say about the potential of experimental cinema to produce philosophy? What role do you think experimental cinema has in producing philosophy? This is the question for you.
Mhm. Yeah, this is something that's as close to my heart as something can be. It's always been interesting to me that the field of so-called film philosophy remains so deeply connected to, classical Hollywood cinema and art cinema, which is fine, and of course, a lot of interesting work is produced. But as someone who's been an experimental filmmaker and video maker for a very long time, and is quite attached, loosely speaking, to what is called conceptual art, it seems to me that if one wants to talk about the relationship of image making to thinking, and the ways that images can present in their materiality philosophical problems, that experimental cinema is a much richer terrain for these things to happen. And I've always been surprised for those reasons that when I go to film philosophy conferences, that there's that there's not a much greater interest in experimental work, because experimental work is experimental in creative practice in the way that philosophy itself is experimental in the creation of concepts.
So thanks for your answer and thanks for your participation. It's a very great honor to see you here. Thanks a lot for SineFilozofi Journal. We are finishing the session. Thanks a lot.
Okay, no other questions?
Sorry, one more question about your speech. Sorry for this. Yeah. Okay, we have an audience and he is very willing to ask a question to you. It's going to be a final question.
Sure.
Sorry for this.
Thank you, Mr. Rodowick, for your excellent speech about philosophy of others. Today morning, I have seen on the web the restoration of Wells' movie, The Process, at the trial, 1962. This is 4K restoration. I'm wondering about your opinion about restoration. Actually, is it the similar movie, or we are changing or reconstructing the moving image? Actually, what is your opinion about that, or your?
I mean, that's very complex. I have, no objections to of making 4K or better prints of older works. It's a way of preserving them. The question becomes more difficult when works have to literally be reconstituted. I mean, I hold by my idea from Virtual Life of Film that the experience of watching analog cinema is a temporal experience different from watching digital projections. And then it becomes an even more complex case if you're watching it streaming on YouTube like you just described. But on the other hand, I'm, how shall I say, agnostic about this, because such works, need to be preserved. And there's just multiple ironies compounding around how the analog passes into the digital and back again. For example, almost all Hollywood films are shot digitally now, but the studio's preservation prints are reprinted to 35 millimeter photochemical film because it's actually more stable than digital files. So, there's no clean answer to this question. I would rather have a digital copy of that film on YouTube than to have no copy of it at all. So, which is probably the only simple answer I could describe.
So thanks a lot. I think we can complete the session. Thanks a lot again for your participation.
Thank you all for listening.